These are the 5 mistakes I see happen at pretty much every stage of podcast journey, although I think it looks different. I want to talk today about how they show up in those first 50 episodes, because that might be the time where these 5 things are the most hazardous and the most detrimental to you and your show. So let's dig into it. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. It's going to be a good one, 594 today, and we're talking about these mistakes because they happen in different flavors at different points in your journey. I think these are the things that show up. I'm going to say it this way. These are the things that are the root of the cause of lots of symptoms. And those symptoms look different during different points of your podcast journey. For me at 594, some of these things still show up, and they're things I have to address. I'll talk specifically about which one of these still come up and what it looks like, but I want to talk about today what these look like in those first 50 episodes, because that's where I see these specific mistakes that look like this have really detrimental impact, meaning these are show killers. These 5 mistakes are the mistakes people make that cause them to bail before they really see results, that cause them to ditch the whole thing, throw the baby out right with the bathwater, so to speak. So I want to dig into them. Before we dig into them, one of the biggest mistakes podcasters are making, not being a part of the podcast newsroom. If you haven't joined us for the podcast newsroom, now is a really good time. I open up spots for podcast audits to them first. I open up spots for podcast strategy intensives to them first. They find out first when we have room for production clients. It's sort of the first place I go whenever there's anything. If I'm stress testing an offer, subscribers to the podcast newsroom find out first. And in addition to that, each month there is a podcast episode giving you the news you need right now for a more profitable podcast. We've got the March episode out already, of course, and we'll be launching our April episode in just a few weeks, just a week or so. So make sure you join us. Thepodcastnewsroom.com has everything you need to get signed up and get your private feed right now. The number one mistake I see with podcasters in these first 50 episodes is a lack of respect for the launch. And I don't mean this in a way around not giving it the energy it deserves. I think more not respecting the energy it takes, the effort it takes. Launching a podcast is not dissimilar from launching an offer, launching a membership, launching a course, launching a new service, except there's no immediate financial payoff. So it's all of the same energy of a launch, but without those lovely PayPal, Stripe, Square, whatever it is that you use as a payment processor notifications going, money, 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 right? Instead, it's going to show up as DMs and emails and downloads and opt-ins and subscriptions. And those subscriptions you can't necessarily see, so they're going to manifest themselves as the consistency in your downloads, or someone saying, hey, I subscribed. Ratings and reviews can be an early one. This is actually the one place where I'm like, I actually really like ratings and reviews at the beginning, because it's a really good way for us to build in some feedback for you. Some positive reinforcement. But it's a launch. It's a lift. It's a not at all insignificant lift. And it's going to take time, it's going to take attention, and it's going to take money. It just is. Now, that money may be hiring an editor. That money may be hiring somebody on your team to help you with the marketing efforts. That money may be you choosing to do podcast promotion and launch tasks instead of hop on a sales call. And I know that doesn't sound like money because you're not actually sending any money out, but you're not going to be present for the amount of sales activity that you normally are present for during a podcast launch, because that sales activity is still happening, but it's focused on a thing that is not generating revenue right now. Your show will very likely not make you money the first month, 3 months, 6 months, because you're building the show. Right then, you are selling the show. You're building that library of assets. That takes time. And so you have to respect the launch. And by respecting the launch, you build in the pieces that take care of you. You dig deep into the minimum viable product mentality. Consider the first 50 episodes of your podcast a stress test, a beta test. Consider those first 50 episodes an experiment. I'll be honest, we're at 594. This is still an experiment because I'm always tweaking something. I'm always playing with something. I'm always looking at ways that I can deliver this better. And a lot of the changes that happen to the show, you will never see. You will never hear. You would probably never notice happened because they're back-end changes. Because the thing that I'm most mindful of with this show, after its ability to generate leads and convert them, is that I have to be able to show up for it consistently. If I don't do that, it can't generate and convert leads. And so I have to be mindful of how big of a lift this show is. What is needed for me to continuously show up, consistently show up for this lift. And so that means not just respecting the launch, but respecting the lift, the energetic expenditure that this show is, and preparing for it. And that really takes us into the second mistake. So the second mistake podcasters make in their first 50 episodes is they do not have a plan for when they get lifed. And this is a little bit sort of the long tail version of the first problem, not respecting the energetic expenditure that is launching a new podcast. And it tends to lead right into a chase and having to chase those episodes in the sense of, I've got to get these done because they have to be turned around because I have to get episodes up so that I can be consistent. And now we're creating content to fulfill an obligation, not to serve a purpose, not to serve a person, me or the listener, right? We're checking a box. And that's where your show becomes real useless, real fast, because we're not putting the effort into creating content that is going to actually deliver a result, serve a purpose, and worse, that leads us to feeling completely burned out by the show, and we cannot figure out why we can't get a return. And this is when you end up on a call with me. And I go, oh, your show's actually not bad. It's just like we could do this, and this. And it actually becomes about getting some of the show off your plate so that you can show up for the strategy, so that you can build really strong assets that deliver results. But without a plan for when you get lifed, because you will, love. It happens all the time. I'm recording these right now about a month later than I planned on it because I got a head cold. It wasn't bad. I felt fine. I worked. I was great. It was just sinus stuff, really. It's just a very stereotypical head cold, but it screwed my voice for a while. I just had that funny sort of, you'll probably hear it in a couple of the episodes in early March because I tried to power through for some of those. You'll hear that I sounded a little off and I sound better now. But this is later than I planned to record it because I was trying to navigate a voice issue. It wasn't hanging around for as long as it should for me to batch the way I normally do. And so I got lifed. But here's the deal. I'm still recording this episode 3, almost 4 weeks before it will come out. Seriously, 5 days short of 30 days before this episode will be released. I'm recording it because I have a plan and space for when I get lifed. Because again, you will. You might be right now, and that's why you're tuned into this show at all. That's how you got here, is because you were getting lifed and you were trying to figure it out. And so what does that plan need to look like? That plan needs to look like having an asset library that can be repurposed. That's going to look like having support that helps you get parts of the show done. That's going to look like having a strategic plan so that you're not sitting down with a fuzzy head because your mind is being pulled in 400,000 different directions because you've got a lot going on because you're getting lifed. And you don't have capacity to go, okay, so what do they need to hear? What do I want to talk about? No, that's not having a plan. That's lifing yourself, essentially. Instead, I want to be able to sit down and just pull this up. This episode is a great example of that. Again, I'm a little behind the ball, and when I would normally have recorded this, I've already told the team twice, hey, it'll be this week. Oh, wait, sorry, it'll be this week. I'm finally getting it done today. And so if I also had to sit down and go, okay, so what are we talking about March 22nd? I'd have been big time screwed, and it would have been another week of me going, it'll definitely be this week that I get the rest of those March episodes to you, team. But instead, I opened up my project management board. I opened up Monday. I opened up my task that was on my calendar to record today. I saw the title of the episode, the working title of the episode, and my outline. And I just turned the mic on and I just started talking to you. Because I had already done the work to do the work. I had set up everything I needed so that I could be successful when I sat down to do this. Because I have a plan for when I get lifed. Now, as we're talking through this, you've noticed it's been a lot about us. It's been a lot about me and you and the person behind the mic. But what about the person with the earbuds in? This is the number 3 mistake podcasters make in their first 50 episodes. They think their show is about them. And when we build a show, when we talk about a show that is built to generate and convert leads, it's easy for us to really make it about us. What do I want to talk about? What do I think is interesting in this field that is my expertise? When in reality, it's not about us. It's not even about our expertise. It's about supporting the listener and helping them make a decision. It's about the listener getting the information they need so that they can move forward with something. And we talk a lot about this from a problem perspective, and I want to shift that a little bit today because I think the problem side of this is obvious, right? You start listening to the show because you launched a podcast and you want to get the best results from it possible. And so in theory, your pain is that you have a podcast that is getting not the results you want, right? It's getting subpar results right now. Cool. And so it's easy for me to go put my thumb on that pain point and say, cool, you're here because you want a better show than you have now. Here's how you have a better show. But let's talk about those instances where there's not a, heavy on the air quotes here, problem to solve. There's just me learning about something because you teach something that I think might be interesting. I think this can be really common with folks who teach hobby stuff. So maybe you teach singing lessons online. You've got a membership for vocal lessons, or you've got an art membership for adults who are just passionate about art. And not a lot of grown-up adult art classes anymore, right? You know, some city programs have stuff, and the quality there is always, who knows? I've had great ones, I've had not great ones, whatever. But that's often the content we're consuming is just stuff that's based around our interests. And I think oftentimes we think of those kind of podcasts can only really be ad-based. I can only be seeing results here if I'm getting sponsors. And I do think that those are absolutely supported by having sponsorship components, even if it's just affiliate setups for your favorite tools and the things you recommend most often, setting up kind of a resource page of your favorites. A great example of that is one we've done for this show, because there are things we recommend over and over again. So now if you go to uncommonlymore.com/resources, you'll see a list of our favorites, who we host with, who we recommend for hosting, who we use for transcription, some gear recommendations, some of the tools we use, because I get those questions enough that it makes sense. And that can be a great way for a show who, again, is somebody who's not necessarily solving a problem, but instead teaching about a hobby or an interest. And the pain point is that I think this is interesting and I want to know more and I want to do more with this. Absolutely, that could be a great way to subsidize the show, build in some revenue outside of services that are not necessarily traditional sponsorships, traditional per downloads. You're essentially selling the things you're already selling. But let's talk about it from a content perspective, right? If the show is about them and not just about me, what is the air quote problem I'm trying to solve? What am I doing to generate leads and convert them if I'm not shoving my thumb in a big gaping wound? Man, was that graphic and unnecessary, but that's so often how we're sold on marketing, how we're taught to market. And that doesn't make sense in every place. Maybe it just doesn't resonate with you. But how do we do it without doing that? Well, we still need to know the same answer. And that's the answer to the question, what do they need to know next to make a decision? That doesn't have to mean making them hurt. It just means fulfilling the questions they have about moving forward. So if I'm somebody who is selling an art membership for people who want to be painting more as adults, they don't want to sell their art. They're not looking they just want to be better artists. They want to be in a community of artists. They want to spend more time in art, in creativity. I think we've seen a lot of that in the last few years. So how do we do that? Well, we tell them what they need to know next to decide if now's the right time for them. So do you have the space and capacity in your calendar to be able to implement this? What kind of things do I do in my membership that help you maximize your time with this hobby? Because I acknowledge that this is a hobby and you probably don't have 8 hours a day to spend doing it. So how do you, I would do episodes about how we add art to everyday life, how we take boring moments and add spices of creativity, how I spend 5 minutes a day reconnecting with my art, how I'd be talking about those things. I'd still be doing the things where we're doing case studies around what's happening in the community, why this is an investment worth making, even though it's just a hobby. Really speaking to the importance of hobbies and the importance of finding a creative outlet that's not monetized to the high heavens. This is a thing I really suck at. I'm really bad about being like, hobby time can just exist. I can just do something because I enjoy it. I don't have to have checked some sort of box first to have earned that time. I don't have to fight with the instinct to monetize it, to make it worth it. Whatever it is, you could spend your content normalizing that because maybe they're struggling with that. But the point is it's not about what I want to talk about with art. It's not about what I want to talk about with creativity. Instead, it's about helping them work through their thought process before they take action, before they implement, or as they're starting to implement, so that it can be easier on them, so that it can be more fulfilling, so that they can get what they want to get out of that experience. And so that's what it looks like for us to be thinking about them instead of thinking about us. And this brings me to the number 4 mistake podcasters are making in their first 50 episodes. And this is honestly a direct contradiction to the last one. You're spending so much time trying to earn your call to action that you are trying to value them into a sale. You are trying to absolutely drown them in value. Like if I just show up and I prove to them how smart I am, they will throw money at me like there is a no tomorrow. That's not actually how it works. If it did, that would just be mother love and glorious. This maybe comes up on every podcast strategy intensive we've done. This has come up at some point. I think we've talked about this a little bit on the audits over at the podcast newsroom. It comes up a lot. You cannot value your way into a sale. Does this mean you shouldn't provide podcast value? No, absolutely. This episode is value. Most of this content here is about me teaching you something, about you being able to recognize. This is straight value, today's episode. Now, are there sales messages in there? Yes. Am I doing this to build trust? Yes. But this is a content episode. This is an episode where I'm coming in with value, not to earn my call to action, not to earn my and now I can tell you what the offer is. No, because this is what we talk about here. And this is the stuff you need to know. We don't work with many podcasts who have done less than 50 episodes. Most of our clients come in somewhere between 40 and 80 episodes. And we absolutely have outliers. We have occasionally taken on a launch client. We do not do that very often. There's got to be a really good case to be made for us to take on a launch client at this point. Or they're 100 or 150 or 200 episodes in, and we're maybe not even their first podcast production company they've worked with. But a lot of them come in where we are their first production company, and they're right about that 50 episode mark. And up until now, they have just been like, well, I want to get subscribers. I want to build the show, and then I'll start adding more calls to action. Or, I don't want to be too salesy. I don't want to be too much all about me. And so it's really been focused on getting them the value so they can see how good working with us would be. Is if I just keep teaching them about it. When in reality, they're trying to sell a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 service where the person doesn't want to know how to do it. The buyer wants to know that you're gonna do it. Talk to me about results, not process. So stop trying to earn your call to action. Stop trying to earn the sale. There's not a deserving line here where it's been enough about them and now it can be about me. No, it's always about both of you. It's about you delivering what they need to make their next decision. See point 3. And in doing that, they will recognize that you know what you're talking about because you know when it's right for them. You're seeing where they're not yet ready or where it's way past time because of how you're talking about the content and how you're positioning their readiness. It is not about earning it. It is not about hitting some magic percentage mark where the show is 80% value and 20% sales. No, there's not a magical line of delineation where you get to start selling with your show. You should always be selling from your show because your show is built to sell. And the way we do that is by helping them identify readiness. If they're not there yet, get there. If they're there, tell them what to do next. That's what the show is for. I want to wrap it up. The number 5 mistake podcasters make in that first 50 episode is kind of a twofer. It's about hiring. They're either not hiring any support or they're hiring way too much support. I talked just a second ago about the fact that we don't do many launches. We do not bring in a lot of launch clients. Because full disclosure, I don't love doing a launch. They're a big energetic output. They're a big energetic lift. There's a lot of feelings to work through in a launch process. Every bit of it will come up. Every insecurity, every not enoughness, every I'm not going to do this right will come up. Do I have enough to say? Do I have too much to say? Am I saying the right thing? All of it. And you've got to be ready to work through that. And if you're not, I'm going to just be real ass honest with you. It's going to be miserable for the people you hire to help you. You've got to be ready to be honest about what's holding you back. You've got to be honest with them about so that they can help you manage it. And if they're not equipped to help you manage it, you need to find somebody who is. But you've got to be able to show up for that discomfort. And what I so often see is people deciding that they're going to hire a production team like ours, where we're fairly full service. We do a lot of strategy work. We do a lot of customer support. We do a lot of host support. It's a big part of what we do. It's the more, right? And we can only meet you halfway. I can't help you if you hide. I can't help you if you can't talk to me. I can't help you if you can't muscle through and get the episodes done when they need to get done. It just ends up delaying everything, and it just makes it harder to get out of the hole. And so sometimes hiring too much support will hurt if you can't show up to be supported by that support. I've been really lucky in the sense that we have had our launch clients all be really honest when they were like, here's what I'm going through. And we have had some launch clients get lifed before their launch. I'm talking like 6 and 8 week illnesses, family crisis, turbulence, all sorts. We've seen people get lifed during their launch and really in their pre-launch, and still so impressively stay in communication with us, talk to us, get it done. And we can always figure it out. But you've got to be able to raise your hand and show up for the conversation. And on the flip side of that, not hiring enough support. Support doesn't have to be a full production team. It doesn't have to be Uncommon anymore. Like I said, in most cases, we're not a fit for launch. In the cases where we bring on a launch client, there is a real commitment to a 12-month experiment. I'm creating a 52-episode container, and this is what I want to do. And then on the other side of that, I'll figure out if the show's going to continue, but I want to build a year's worth of assets that I can lean on. Cool. That's a single-sized project. I can do that. However, if you're somebody who's like, I just want to try this for a while and see how it goes. I mostly want to DIY. I want to be able to just record and get the show out. Cool. I would still suggest hiring some support. This is why, full disclosure, podcast strategy intensives exist. They were really built for our launch prospects who don't want and or need full-scale production, but they do need some insights in how to launch their show successfully, get an idea of what they need to be talking about. So, we're building out that first 12 weeks of content. Essentially, we're building a season. Here's what you're going to talk about. Here's how you're going to market it. Here's how you're going to get ready for this. Here's your recording process. Now just go deliver those episodes, and then we can debrief and see what that looks like. It's one of the reasons there's a second call in our intensives. There's the initial 2-hour intensive, and then there's that second 45-minute call. For some people, we do it about halfway through that 12-week period. For some people, it's at the end of that 12-week period so that we can debrief what happened in that launch. It just depends on what your larger goals are for your podcast experiment, right? So finding some help. Maybe it's somebody on your team. Maybe you have a VA or an OBM on your team who's kind of your right hand or your ride or die. Cool. This is the person you need to be talking through your content plan with. This is the person who you need to be saying, hey, I'm going to need some extra support here, here, and here because I'm leaning into this growth edge. I'm doing this scary thing. But don't do it alone. Don't do it isolated. Don't do it in a silo. It will be harder. Baby bear this. Look for the just right. Look for the just right now. It will look different. It will change. In the course of your show, there will be monumental amounts of change. I've been doing this show 10 years now. 10 years. Nothing about me or my life or my business or this show would survive if it were the exact same it had been 10 years ago. There will be change. Look for the support you need right now, not the support you might want to have at some point. That's the gist right here. That's the baby bear of it all. Cool? Spots are open for podcast strategy intensives in April if you'd like to grab one. We do have 2 spots available for podcast production in April if you'd like to join us for that. All of that information is at uncommonlymore.com. If you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, that's the first place I talk about space and capacity and openings. And we've got spots open for the podcast audit. So all of that is over at thepodcastnewsroom.com. Thanks for listening. I'll see you right back here next week. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.